Hi, friends. So a while back, I spoke to you about forgiveness. But you know what? I never spoke to you about reconciliation. I only spoke about forgiveness. And it was in one of the previous videos a few months ago. I really want to talk to you about the differences between forgiveness and reconciliation. Because I think one of the hang-ups that we have about forgiving other people who have hurt us, especially those who have hurt us really deeply, is that we assume that to forgive another person, then I also have to reconcile with them. That I also have to come back into a relationship with them. And that forgiveness may lead to reconciliation, but it doesn't always lead to reconciliation. Here's the thing, it doesn't always have to. We may not be, or that person may not be capable of reconciling with us and healing the relationship. So I want to talk about the difference between forgiving and reconciliation. You can certainly go back and look at the video about forgiveness. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but the differences between the two. So let's jump into that. You've been hurt, I've been hurt. I mean, we as humans cannot go through life without hurting one another, without being hurt by other people, right? So you know what that feels like, and I know what that feels like. You've been hurt, I've been hurt. What to do with that? One of the things that we do in our fallen state when somebody hurts us is that we want them to experience the pain that they have visited upon us, right? I mean, that's part of our brokenness as human beings. So if you hurt me, then my natural inclination as a fallen human person is that I want to hurt you, or I want someone to hurt you, or I want God to hurt you, or I want you simply in some way to feel the consequences of what you've done to me. Now, what happens with that is an ugly thing, right? We either act upon that, or we get somebody else to act upon that, or we expect God to act upon that. But when we act upon, or another person acts upon it, and that person gets their just due, or what we think their just due is, it doesn't leave us satisfied. It doesn't leave us fulfilled. We still have the pain, right? Or when God doesn't act upon it the way we think that he should act upon it, it can even hurt our relationship with God. And so that type of retribution or revenge or justice in our minds, it leads us to some pretty dark places. And it also keeps the other person in a really dark place. It keeps us from God, and it can keep the other person from God too. So there's just really no good that comes out of that type of reaction to hurt. No. So we know that that's not good for us and good for others in our relationship with God. But our hang-up is what we think forgiveness has to be. So let's talk a few moments about what forgiveness is not. Okay. Forgiveness is not just using words like I forgive you, but then not also on the level of the will, letting that person go. And I know that takes time, and that was in my other talk. But forgiveness is also not about condoning the behavior of the other person, or excusing the behavior of the other person, or pretending what the person did doesn't matter. That's not forgiveness. Or thinking that what the person has done to me really isn't all that important and didn't hurt me that bad. And I think we think along those lines whenever we say to ourselves, I'm a Christian and I need to forgive this person. No, when we forgive persons, let's just say it's, like a spouse who hurts us badly, like an infidelity, and we forgive that person. Where our minds often go, what we assume forgiveness is that if I forgive my spouse, then my spouse is going to think that he can or she can do it again. that I'm excusing the behavior, that I'm condoning the behavior, I'm accepting the behavior, that what they did really didn't hurt me that bad, right? No, that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is this, simply. Even if you just look at the word, it's forgiving. So look at like forward, right? And giving. When we forgive somebody, we give life back to them and we allow them to move forward. But we also give life back to ourselves and allow ourselves to move forward. In that relationship with that person or not in that relationship with that person. But certainly always in relationship with God, who's the one who can restore us to life. But unless we're willing to forgive another person like God forgives us, then we're not able to give what God can give us, which is life. Give life back to us, heal us, restore us, and in fact, make us stronger than we ever were before by letting that go and letting that person go. And when we forgive in that way, we allow that person to move forward in their life too. And that's important. Whether we say it to the person, certainly if we can, but we treat that person, certainly if we can, but even just in our prayer for that person, in our relationship with God, if we can forgive that person, we release that person on an existential level to start being able to live their life rather than be held bound by the death blow of sin that continues to hurt them whether we see it or not and hold them whether we know it or not. That's forgiveness. Is giving life back to that person and giving life back to ourselves by re-entering into a relationship with God, asking God to help us to let that go, letting that go, and then letting that person go. And that's what restores life. That's what forgiveness is. Now, on to reconciliation. So what's reconciliation? Again, even if we break down the word reconciliation, it really reveals the meaning of what reconciliation is and isn't. So at the beginning, is like a repeat, again, okay? And then con means with, and cilia, in Latin, it means eyelash or eyelid, and then shun is an action, like a motion. It's always indicating an action. So you put all of those things together, and this is what you get. Reconciliation is a coming back into, it's doing the action of coming back into a relationship with a person, eyelash to eyelash. What it means is that when we can truly reconcile with a person, we are able to get close to them again. And they're able to get close to us. And we allow them to get close to us, or they allow us to get close to them. It's an intimacy, it's a willingness to be vulnerable again. And it's only in that intimacy and that vulnerability again that real life is able to be shared between the two and shared between one another in a reciprocal manner. Reconciliation is standing eyelash to eyelash. It's interesting too that, it's one of the reasons why when we go through the sacrament of reconciliation, it can't be like over the phone or over Zoom or at a distance, through some media. It has to be in person with a priest, and it has to be close, eyelash to eyelash, because the person, in this case the priest, represents Jesus Christ and his priesthood and in his person, in his Godhead. And the way God reconciles us to himself is eyelash to eyelash. Vulnerability, intimacy, an emptying of oneself, a letting go of our sins, and the pulling us close to him so that we might have life returned to us again. And so then the very thing that happens in the sacrament of reconciliation, and it happens in our relationship with God, if we want to reconcile, if we're capable of reconciling with another person, that's what it looks like, right? But here's the thing, and here's where we get confused. And we often think that forgiveness is reconciliation, or that it always has to lead to reconciliation. And the fact of the matter is, given our brokenness as human beings, we may not be able to reconcile with the person who has hurt us deeply. We can always, with God's grace, forgive them, as we've talked about and I've described. We can do that, and that takes time. And again, it's only with God's grace, and it only begins by going to Him and reconciling with Him, and ourselves being in a right relationship with Him, and being eyelash to eyelash with Him, that we'll ever have the strength and the wherewithal and the grace and the love and the ability to forgive another person. But we may not be able to reconcile with that person because they may not be able to reconcile with us. They may not be willing or able to go eyelash to eyelash with us. Or we may not be in a place after we forgive them to go eyelash to eyelash with them. Maybe one day we get there, but maybe not, And I want to use the example again of a great hurt, like an infidelity between a husband and a wife. I have certainly seen and been a part of, as a priest, men and women who are husbands and wives, and one of them has been unfaithful to them. And there's so much hurt that's involved there, right? And it takes a lot of work for that person who has been violated in the relationship, who's been hurt, who's been betrayed, an act of infidelity against him or her. It takes that person a lot to forgive, but only, again, if they understand what forgiveness is and isn't. Are they willing to do that? But then when that happens, I've also seen that person who's been so hurt, who then cries out to God and depends upon God in a way that they never have, and then grows closer in their relationship with God because of this great hurt. And then they go eyelash to eyelash with God. And they come back to a relationship with God that was always meant to be in their life, but maybe before that infidelity, they never experienced in that relationship. And so they reconcile. They go back to like almost original holiness and God's original plan for their relationship with God because of that great hurt. They run to God. And now that they're in this reconciled, or should I say, a right relationship with God, the way that they should have been all of their life but couldn't have been, except for this. Then are they able to go to their spouse and are willing to go eyelash to eyelash with them. And then what I've seen happen is that relationship with that spouse grows stronger than it ever was before. And it becomes the type of relationship that was always meant to be as husband and wife. Not despite the infidelity, but actually through the infidelity. And they truly reconcile. They truly come back through an action, to a relationship, a right relationship, where they're open and vulnerable and intimate and closer than they ever have been before. Now, that being said, I've also seen as a priest where the person who has been so deeply hurt cannot even forgive the person, and not forgiving that person really has some ground to make in their relationship with God. Or said another way, God's calling them to a deep, abiding relationship through this deep hurt, but they're not there yet. And they haven't reconciled themselves with God and created that right relationship with God. And so they're not even able to forgive. But some can, and they do reconcile with God, meaning they get back through this act of infidelity to a relationship with God that was always meant to be there. And that relationship grows stronger. And so they're able to forgive that other person. But they're just not yet in a place where they're able to reconcile with that person. And maybe because of where that person is. They're not vulnerable yet. They're not able to be intimate yet. They're not healed yet. They're not reconciled with God yet. And because of that, that relationship isn't able to become eyelash to eyelash. And that person moves on from that relationship in order to find further healing with God and further healing in themselves, and to let that relationship go so that person can truly find reconciliation and forgiveness with God and come back to life, and then be able to find a life with other people again one day. I've seen both. But the reason why I want to share this with you today is simply to say this, that forgiveness is always necessary. It's always difficult, but it's not always what reconciliation is. Sometimes it can lead to reconciliation and sometimes not. And I think that's an important distinction for us to make, because if we don't know that, then we won't even begin the journey of forgiveness, because we think that it's something that it's not. Until next time.